That one's old.
Okay, today is March 6, 1984. This is Joe Todd, an interview with Melvina Baker. Mrs. Baker, where were you born?
Around Talihina, I was told.
And when's your birthday?
October 15, 1909.
Who's your father?
Edward Colbert.
And who was your mother?
Lena Lewis. She was enrolled as Lena Lewis.
Were they both from Oklahoma?
Yes.
Where were you born? In Talihina, right? Okay. How long did you live in Talihina?
I really don't know, because my grandpa lived at Red Oak, and she comes and goes. She'd stay a while with grandpa, and then she'll go back and stay over there. And while she was there, I was born there in a house. Wasn't no hospital or anything.
Yeah.
And then she brought me back to grandma, and she was living with my dad. They were married and living with my dad, and he'd get drunk and run her off. And she happened to be back in Talihina when she died, and I was raised up by my grandfather.
What was your grandfather's name?
Woodson Lewis.
Woodson Lewis?
Yes.
Was he from Oklahoma?
Yes.
What kind of work did your grandfather do?
Farmer.
Farm. Can you tell me, as a little girl, what kind of chores you did around the house?
Well, carry wood in.
What kind of house did your grandfather live in?
Well, it was a lumber house that has chimney and a hall, open hall. And there was a room to itself on the other side. That was the dining and kitchen. And on one side was a bedroom and a side room, 2 bedrooms that way.
Is that what they call a dog trot house?
I don't know. The shingles was homemade. They made it themselves.
Is that the type they made with a fro?
At that time, that's the kind we lived in.
Yeah. Have you heard any stories about the Trail of Tears, the removal?
Yes, through my husband's grandmother.
What was her name?
Elizabeth Johnson, married to Houston Baker Lewis. Houston Baker, I guess the first, because my husband was named after him, and then I named my boy after his dad.
What kind of stories did she tell you?
That's where I have to look on here. She would either be quilting, and it'd be at night after we got our chores done, and she'd be sitting on the floor with a quilt toppled across her lap by a chimney fire, and she would complain about hardship, because we were newly married and didn't have anything, and it was hard for us to start, and we wanted to move to ourselves at once and couldn't. So she began to tell us about her hardship, that they didn't have no furniture. They had to sleep on the floor or ground whatever kind of house they were living in. And they had to move from Mississippi while she was in her teenage. She didn't know her age. She couldn't read or write, and she didn't know her age. But she knew the Bible verses because she listened to a preacher. His text was, she learned them by memory that way. And she told us about a lot of wagons that was carrying food, children, and sick people. And they take turns in riding. And some of them were walking, get tired, well, they'd get in the wagon. Those who were riding would get out and walk. And they'd stop at some places to rest their horses. They stayed there a week or so, and then they run out of food. They ate wild lettuce. They learned to eat those. Mustard, onions, and they go several days without food or water. And the only place they found the water was a big tree had blown over with roots, and all muddy water was in this hole where the tree was standing and blew over. And they camped by it and drink that muddy water, and they cook with it too. And all kinds of snakes, bears, buffaloes, deers, turtles, lizards, and all of them come to this place to drink. And they didn't bother the people, nor they didn't bother them at the water. They did go out and hunt and kill deers and buffaloes. They get their fill and take along what they have left, and they moved on. So many of them, food didn't last long. Some people died on their way, and they would bury them and go on. One of her people died too. And listening to her trip, we had tears in our eyes too. Praise God, Elizabeth was faithful to go to church and camp for the meeting. She always had sour cornbread, banana, and pishofa and tomfula that she mauled the corn. And on her last trip to church at Cedar, that's where we all went to church, and she lost her way. She down on her knees, crawling to find the bridge to cross. One more step, she could have fallen into the water when white man came along and brought her to church. My husband and I took her to her daughter, Emmeline Stollaby. She got disabled where she can't walk and died there. She was over 100 years old, buried at Cedar Baptist Church. And she had grandsons, which was my boys. 3 of my boys served in Army. Johnny was the oldest and served in Navy 20 years, and he's now retired. Robert served 3 years in Korea. He died last October. And Ralph served in Kansas 1 year. And his one other grandson was John Stollaby Jr. He died in the World War I. That's all I had written down about her. And I did have her picture, but somehow or another I've lost it. But I thought maybe Ann Barbie might have it. She's a great granddaughter.
Her name was Elizabeth Johnson.
And she married Houston Baker.
What part of Mississippi did they live in?
She didn't say.
And they settled at Cedar?
Well, they settled here and there, here in Oklahoma, and then when they were allotted land, well, that's when they stopped at Cedar. That was in 1904, I guess.
Did she say how many people were in their group?
No,
on the trail?
but she said it was a whole bunch. A lot of wagon, horses. Horses don't eat and drink. Some of them died. They didn't have no furniture, or so they used hay for a mattress.
Did she ever tell you about some of the home remedies they used, the medicines?
Well, she knew a whole lot.
Could you tell me about some of them?
I don't know the weeds. I know them when I see it, but by the name, she had it in Indian name and then bring it out in English. I don't know it. One of them was buckbush, and they grow by the creek. They're about that tall bush with little red berries on it. I guess you've seen them. I asked a white lady what that was called. She said it was a buckbush. She got the root of that for flu. And I learned from her, so I make tea out of that. I get that root, give it to my children, and they outcome the flu and go on to school.
You just make a tea out of the root?
And
how long do you boil it, or how much of the root do you use when you make the tea?
Well, she scraped that root till it's white, and just throw it in the kettle, small kettle, and it makes about a pint, and I guess about 15, 20 minutes it boils that long, and they'll turn green. And you sweeten it for kids. Then for whooping cough, she got that red onion skin. Not skin, but one leaf of that red onion. Stuck it in oven, and it made little juice inside of it. And she got that juice in a spoon and cooled it off and gave it to my daughter because she was coming down with a whooping cough. And she told me to watch her, and when she started coughing, can't get her breath, and I stick my finger down in her mouth and pull that flame out. And I did that as she was trying to get her breath. And I did that. Well, that was it. She didn't have it no more. And then I had that green water, so I continued with that.
Do you know the Indian names of some of the remedies? Of some of the bushes?
I don't remember.
What about some of the Indian foods?
We have blue bread, and we call shuck bread, or banaha. Banaha is what we call it.
How do you make that?
Well, we burn the ashes, so we burn the pea hull into ashes. And we get that ashes and sift it and get it fine powdered. And I'll show you some of it I have. It turns to like this.
Oh yeah, it's
And then we put that in cornmeal that we maul in a stump about this tall in a stick. And we maul it down to powder cornmeal, and then we sift that in there about 3 tablespoons to a family size.
They say this is pea holes?
Ashes.
Yeah.
And
what kind of pea makes the best ash?
well, I just use any of them, black eyed peas or purple hull, and that makes it turn to blue. And then we get the shucks. We get the shucks and put it in hot water, and well, I cut my edges with scissors, and we mold that cornmeal. First, though, we wet it with hot water, boiling water. Then when it's cool enough where we could handle it, we roll it into ball-like, then put it in that shucks, and turn it over and wrap it around and tie it in the middle, and then stick it in the kettle of water. Cook about 20 minutes, I guess.
And what do you call that?
Banaha.
Oh, that's the banaha. That's the blue bread.
Then another one would be white people.
On this, what you beat it with, is that called kitty? What's that thing they beat it with?
What I sing, kitosh.
Kitosh. Okay.
The kitty was that tall stuff, and then kitosh is the other. And it had different weights. The lighter one makes the tongue fuller. Just get the hulls off of the corn and not crush, but chop like chops. But the hull comes out we sift them, what do you call them?
Husk.
Husk out by fanning with a basket.
How's the best way to burn the pea holes to ashes? How do you do that?
Well, in my grandpa days, we had a wash pot outside, and we just poured them in there and put fire, get the pea hull started, fire one, it burns up itself. But in here I used an aluminum pan with a little fire underneath it, and put it in and get that started. Keep the fire going in the pea hull so I can hurry and get through in here. And it didn't smoke me out here. But I taught Lillian to do that. She didn't put fire underneath hers and had a smoke filled in her room. And neighbors thought she had a house on fire, and here they came.
What are some of the other Indian foods?
That was banaha, and tomfula was what I told you just then. And then pishofa is, we get this pearl hominy and boil meat bones. I'm used to pork bones. And nowadays I use pork steak, and then it's not so greasy. And the Creeks use beef. They use beef in their pishofa. And I don't like the beef, so always I use the pork.
You say you like to use pork?
Yes.
And how do you fix that?
We just boil it with corn pearl hominy, is what we call it nowadays. We used to call it tomfulla, tonchi. Like you would the beans. When you cook beans, you can add a meat in it, It's like that.
Is that the same as Tunch Labona?
I call it pashofa.
Do you make hominy?
I can, but I don't have no corn. I don't make it with lye. I don't like to.
How do you make it?
Well, I think we boiled it down with corn, just shell corn in the wash pot. And I add some lye in it. I don't know how much lye he put in. Keep stirring it until them husk comes off. And then we dip the corn out and wash it. Continue washing until we think it's free from all that lye. And then another way that my grandpa did was ashes, that you burn wood and get the ashes from the green wood and put it in a wash pot and set a fire underneath the pot. Keep stirring it till all them husk comes off. Tastes good, but I don't like to do it. Lazy.
Now, I have seen the yellow hominy and the white hominy. What's the difference between the two?
Well, they say, I guess it's got more vitamins because he used to say it make you fat, the yellow corn. And it's easy to go into meal instead of pearl hominy. They crack easier.
Did they use hoppy in this?
Sometimes.
They use, what was it? They use
Salt.
salt. What you call it?
Hoppy.
Hoppy.
We, Grandpa didn't like salt in his, so I'm just in the habit not salted.
Did the Choctaws bring any of the old ceremonies with them from Mississippi?
If they did, Grandma Baker didn't use it. But she did believe in the Lord. She went to church and she said that they did do some service on the road, like pray, sing and pray when they go to camp. But I guess they were all Christian on her side, that she didn't tell anything about what, like dances, I guess you're referring to. She didn't tell anything of that.
Do the Choctaws have, like up in the northeast part of the state, they have what they call a picnic once a year. And that's when everybody gets together and they have a picnic. Everybody cooks for it. And it's just a big celebration.
I don't know if they celebrate or not, but they did. All the wagons that was grouped together, whatever food they got, they shared. All the way up here. And if they go and praise the Lord or have their service, they had it together. And there were a lot more coming, but they were in groups, as she was saying, or just a mile or not that far behind them or ahead of them.
How long did it take to get to Oklahoma from Mississippi?
She didn't know. It took a long time.
Do you remember World War I?
Not too much.
Where did you start to school?
I started at Henry, but Henry's not there anymore. And then I ended up at Tuskhoma for a short time.
What was the school at Tuskhoma?
It was Girls' Academy, female academy.
Tell me about the academy there at Tuskhoma.
I don't remember how old I was, but I had long hair, and all of us little ones, we had to cut our hair off because some Indian brought some bugs with them, so they had to get shed of that. They cut our hair first thing. So we got shed of that, and we slept in dormitory. It was from one end to the other, and the building was T for Tuskhoma, and it was from there to there. And this way was the bottom was the kitchen and the dining room. The second floor was school, classrooms, and on all the floor, the second floor was. And the third floor was the bigger girls' apartments. And the fourth floor was the one that the little folks went, the dormitory.
Okay. So you stayed in the crossbar of the T,
Mm-hmm.
and then the kitchen and everything else was in the bottom part of the T.
Yeah. And we had to march down from second floor when the music teacher started playing music. Well, we had to keep time. Mm-hmm. Another thing I didn't like, we had to clean our fingernails. As we marched down, we had to go by a matron showing our fingernail. She looks at us from head to toe, and anything's wrong with us, well, she pull us out.
Who was the matron? What was her name?
I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. In the dormitory, was it one big room? Or
Mm-hmm.
how many girls?
150, I think. Did you used to go there? You didn't? I thought all did. So.
No, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Jones Academy is still going.
Yeah. How old were you when you went there?
I guess about 9 or 10 years old. I don't remember. It was shortly after Grandma died. I was 8 when Grandma died.
Did you have to wear a uniform?
Mm-hmm.
What did the uniform look like?
They called it butterfly. Then it's just straight down, you know, and then the belt. And we all had a number. On Sundays, we can wear our own. Or if we go in town or places, well, we can wear our own.
Where did you study there? What kind of classes did you take?
I guess second or third.
I think you mean like read and write.
Yeah, I was able to read and write. At that time, I was left-handed, so I was way behind because they was trying to get me to write with my right. And I did learn to write with my right, but I couldn't sew with right. And I got way behind on that.
So they're trying to force you to use your right hand.
Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't allow us to speak our language, and I was used to speaking my language, so I was slow in learning.
Does the Choctaw language have an alphabet, a written alphabet?
Yes.
How many characters are in it? How many letters?
The way I teach my pastor, just make that A, and the I, E, and then pronounce it as you spell it. And he did that, and he learned. He could sing with us. But when it comes to ULH, that's ulf. No, and I couldn't get him to say he couldn't remember that.
Could I get you to pronounce the alphabet, the Choctaw alphabet?
Now, I don't know as you go down the ABCs. Like A is E, R, A, and B would B like B, and C was C, D was D, and E would be I too at times, and F, if, and G, H, I was something like E, and J, K when we say key, L, N, O, P, I don't remember the Q, and R, S, T. I don't remember the rest of them. But the way easier to learn is you say that A is ah. Pronounce it as ah. It's mostly ah. And I or E, you can use it as I, E for I.
When was the language first written?
I wouldn't know that.
Do you have any questions? Structured. Like I would say, I'm going to town. How would you say that in Choctaw?
Tamaha Iali. It's backwards. Town I go.
The town is Tamaha. Now there's a little town up here called.
Yeah, they call it Tanaha.
Yeah. Mr. Scott told me that's one of the old towns, Tomaha up here. Is that where they landed when they came from Mississippi? A group of them.
It's some that did, I imagine, when they got the land. You know.
Did all of the Choctaws come overland, or did some come by boat?
All of Grandma tells us is by wagon and walking, horse riding. And she didn't tell us by a boat or anything.
What is your Indian name?
I don't know. My grandpa came from Oksuknippy. It's hickory nut. And as far as we went, said it bothered the white folks to give us land, a lot of land. So the white people gave us the English name while they dropped Choctaw. But on Colbert's side, I don't know that.
What the children played with and the attitude of the parents to the children.
Yeah.
Like, in Japan, they don't let their kids cry ever. And I just wondered if Choctaws was not like that, because I was pretty well spoiled.
I don't think they had any toys. They played them stick balls, as my grandpa used to say, and he goes dancing. He was telling me not to go never go to dance because he's got a cramp in his leg by dance.
What kind of toys did you play with?
Oh, I had stick, and for men, I had one that's got fork on it, and I'd roll up a paper or something, wrap around the cloth, tied onto the stick for a head, and what string got tight with, that's the hands. Then I had matchbox, that was the wick, and tie twine on it, and I'd fill it up with them sticks that I call people, and then for women, I just wrapped the cloth around it, and that ball for head, that was the women. I didn't have no block toys.
You mentioned your grandfather played the stickball game. How often did they have those games?
Now, at the time where I could remember, he didn't play ball. He'd become preacher. So we go in church often. But he used to tell me that he played and they'd get drunk and hit one another with that stick ball. And same way in dancing, they get jealous and fight.
How's a stickball game organized?
I don't know that. I wasn't interested in it. And it has a cup of a thing that they get that, whatever they make it out of can turn to a cup shape. And they use that and they call that the ball stick. And there's a man, if he's still living, I think it's Sidney White, that still makes them, but his got rotted and he threw it away.
Do many of the Choctaw still use the Indian names?
I don't hear of any of Choctaws. I know the Creeks does, but we nickname kids, but we don't bring it out to the court or anything.
When I went up in the Quapaw area, they have a ceremony that they name the children. Do the Choctaws have a ceremony when they give a nickname?
All I go to is church, and they don't do that at the church.
Have you heard of Ben Colbert?
I don't know if it's the same one or not, but there used to be a man at Tuskhoma. I guess it was Reuben, but they called him Ben Colbert.
The reason I'm asking, at the museum we have a bunch of letters from a Ben Colbert who was in the Spanish-American War in the 1890s. I just wondered if perhaps if you're related to him.
I wouldn't know. I never have chased down my folks on Colbert's side. I got a little bit on my mother's side, and I got to that old Sucknippy.
Tomfula?
What's that?
She can tell you.
That tomfula that I said, pearl hominy, well, you just cook that straight. You don't put nothing in it, and that's tomfula. But if you want to dress it, well, you parch the hickory nut and crack them and get the nuts, the goodies out. And the way Grandma used to make was she beat it into almost like peanut butter. And then she put it in this corn that she's cooking. But the way I do, they say it'll make you sick, so I don't beat it. I don't have that maul anyhow, so I put it in cheesecloth or maybe in a little sifter and let that juice barely touch it and let it boil. And go through that sifter with the nuts in it. And I don't put as much as Grandma used to do. And that way it don't make you sick. Some of them loves it and they eat too much of it and make them sick.
So it's hickory nuts and the hominy?
Hickory nut tomfulla.
Hickory nut.
Grandpa used to tell me how they make colors, but I forgot. I should have wrote it down. I know that burdock that has long stickers. You get a root of that and they'll make yellow. Deep yellow, orange, I guess. That's just about all I remembered.
Do you say that you still know which plants to use to make the home remedies with?
What I told you is about all I remember.
How about the sassafras?
Well, they say that one thins your blood, or purifies, as they used to say. You make tea out of sassafras roots. Tastes good when you sweeten it.
What time of year would you get the roots? Or does it matter?
Just before the sap begins to make, as he used to say, just before it starts budding, I guess.
Be about this time of year then?
We had some for the board's meeting last Sunday. I don't know where Betty got a hold of it, but she had a big old roots.
Where did you meet your husband?
He was our hard hand, Grandpa's hard hand. So nobody knew we were flirting around, we was married.
And what's his name?
Houston Baker.
Houston Baker.
Senior, since I had a boy named after him.
When were you married?
May 2nd, 1932.
32. Where were you living when you got married?
Around Lodi, that's about 6 miles from Red Oak.
Were you still living with your grandfather at that time?
No, he died when I was 16. And I married when I was 21.
Where'd you live after your grandfather died? Who'd you live with?
Oh, my sister in, well, here and there, Hartshorn, Haleyville, Callister, a little bit at Cedar. I think that's where I got married when we moved to Cedar.
Tell me about the Depression in the 1930s. How'd that affect you?
Well, I didn't realize it too much. That was Hoover's Day.
Yeah.
I was living with my uncle after Grandpa died. And I had an income then that my grandpa had saved up. So I helped my uncle that I was living with the groceries. I wasn't like some girls, just so as I had dress on, I didn't care what didn't care if it's old or new. And same way with shoes. So I helped them, and he had 8 wolf dogs and about that much of coon dogs. And I had to buy shorts for them to eat, and that made me mad. But I had to buy it. And he had hogs, chicken, cows. So we didn't need no groceries anyhow. So what we buy was flour and sugar, oatmeal, stuff like that. So I had to buy shorts with it for the dogs to eat.
Have you ever heard of the Sequoia Convention?
No.
That was in 1905, I think. That's when,
I wasn't born
Yeah.
yet.
they're trying to make Indian Territory the state of Sequoia. They're trying to make Oklahoma 2 states at one time. But they didn't succeed. Let's see. I'd like to get some more information on the language.
Okay. I know, like my dad now, he was born in 1880, and he went to Jones Academy, and you see that's where they began, well, they had already had this, like they wouldn't let her speak her language. They wanted us to learn, and that's why today I can read anything in Choctaw. I can understand, but I can't communicate. I cannot put it back out. But I can read anything. I read the Choctaw Testament.
That's why Johnny is my boy.
But I can't, because my mother and dad wouldn't allow us to, he had been indoctrinated. She was in Tuskhoma. He was in Jones Academy. They were indoctrinated to forget the language, which is a sad, sad thing. Therefore, I sneaked around and I listened and I figured out what they were talking about. And my grandmother, of course, she couldn't speak English. And I listened to them converse, and I learned the different sounds. It's beautiful. Like she was saying that, there's different things. We have a man named, in our play, Shua. And I said, Illy is dead. And they were saying Illy. See, I-L-L-I. They were saying Illy. And I said, that's not Illy. It's Illy. And there's just a flex to your thing. And Shua is stink. But, if it's terrible, it's a Shua in it. Ooh, Illy Shua. That's bad. And different things like that. It's beautiful language. I like to hear them talk.
How many speakers are there today, Choctaw speakers? Quite a few?
No, this is why. See, if my dad was born in 1880, and he could speak, but he got to where he put English in with the Indian. And a lot of the older ones does
That's
this.
what I do. I mix mine up, and then I'm slow in speaking whenever I have to talk to the white people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. That's where the our language started becoming in the background. You see, very few now. Little ones like him. They
You don't know any.
Is Choctaw being taught anywhere?
In different places, they've made attempts to teach it. We want to start in our society. We want to start a language class.
when I first came here, they wanted to teach the Choctaw language, and I think it was Abe. I didn't know then. Ab Wallen, not Abe. Ab Wallen was teaching, and Winnie said, "That's not it. And that's not the way we say it," but she wouldn't come out and say it for him to get it, but they just quit.
I know this modern language is not like my mother, and I used to attend churches with her, different churches, and now they have the words changed. You know, the different sounds, they're changed. And they put it out to the public, to please the public.
How have the sounds changed? What have they done?
They have, I don't know how it, when I read things that is written, I can tell that it is not, you know, it's not like, even the spelling, sometimes they've changed it. And
What I'd like to do is just get maybe just a list of words. The Choctaw word and then the English word. Just like, you know, house, mother, father. If you do that for us.
Well, Choctaw would be house or home. You know, seem like one word would refer to two or three things. Choctaw's house or home. Tamaha would be town or city.
how about the colors?
Homa would be red. Okalosby, blue. I might be wrong there, but I think it's blue or purple. Lusa, stay quiet. Lusa would be black. Chamali, green. It's about all I can remember.
How about nose, eyes, ears?
Nishkin, eyes. Nishkin, N-I-S-H. K-I-N. Use that I as E. Nishkin, Haksubish, ears. H-A-K. Haksubish. It's ears. A-B, Shakni, nose. Panshi, hair. P-A-C-H-I. Indian spelling. Panshi is Ibba, hand. Iyik, feet or foot. I-Y-Y-I, I believe it's Iyik. That's about all.
What is the Choctaw word for Choctaw?
Oklahoma.
I'm sorry?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Choctaw. Choctaw, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is Indian. Choctaw. And we don't spell it like Choctaws. We spell it like Choctaw. Chahta.
What is horse?
Suba.
And sky?
Abayakni.
How
That
about
be it? I think it's Abayakni.
earth?
Yakni. Yakni.
Tree.
Iti. That's about all I know about it. Iti.
Do you differentiate between the trees like oak, hickory, or they all?
Yeah, but I don't know it all. Iti. That's what I was trying to think. Chiskillik. Blackjack, isn't it? Toto. Toto's. Ellen. I just can't think right.
What is rock?
Tali.
You have a word for buffalo?
Let's see. It just slipped out of me. Yanish.
How about deer or elk?
Isi Nukshupa. Isi could go for goat too. And Nukshupa one deer. Wild goat sound like it.
What's fire?
Luwak.
What's air?
Would it be the same as wind?
Mahali. Could be Mahali. Mahali's wind.
Mm-hmm.
What are the words like good and bad?
Good would be Choctaw. And then bad would be Ikachokmo.
What is a normal greeting in Choctaw? If you meet someone, how do you greet each other?
Halito. Chinchama.
What does that mean?
Good morning or howdy or something. And say, how are you? Chinchama. How are you?
And then when you part, you have a different parting, or is it the same one?
Iyale. I'm going or something like that. Iyale.
When you shake hands in parting, the old people used to do that. They'd say yakoke, bilia.
Well,
You know what that means?
thank you. Forever.
How'd you say that again?
Yakoke, bilia.
Our son saying that you mahila manchapisalachige. That's what my folks used to
See you later, isn't it?
say.
Okay, do you have anything we've left out?
We didn't ask about the clothing.
Yeah, that's right.
Ilifukan.
But like on the Trail of Tears, did she tell what kind of clothing they wore?
No, she didn't, but she said that they washed at the creek. Like they lay it on a rock and get a stick and beat it like and then swash in the water. They didn't have no soap. She had homemade soap, but they didn't have it on their trip.
Have you made soap?
Mm.
How do you make it?
I use them, what do you call them that you fry dry? The
Crackling?
fats. Yeah, crackling. I get a gallon of crackling and a can of lime, boil it down until it's thickened, and then I get the fire away and let it cool. Then cut it into squares,
How long do you cook it?
just until that cracklings eat up. And the bubbles would be big and burst. Then I know it's done.
What's the word for soap?
Tachifa. T-A-C-H-I-F-A. Tachifa.
Did you help in butchering the hogs?
I've stand and watched.
How about rendering lard?
Well, they cut the fats off the hog and such as making it into a sausage when they get all the fats they could. And we fry it in a wash pot or in the house with kettle till it all fried dry. And then we drain the lard into a bucket or whatever container we have. And we don't have to buy grease then.
What are the kind of chores you do besides making soap, rendering lard? And what about doing laundry?
We used to use washboard. And like that one I have there, the leg got broke, so I just hang it up for souvenir.
Mm-hmm.
And tub.
You do it outside?
Mm-hmm. We boil our water in a wash pot, as we call it, them big round pot outside. And then pour our hot water in the tub and rub our clothes. We used to boil them too. We claim that it kills the germs that way. Hang them on the barbed wire, and maybe the mule come along and pull them.
Was your husband a farmer?
Uh-huh.
What kind of crops did you raise?
Corn, cotton.
Tell me about how much cotton could you pick in a day?
I'm ashamed to tell you. I was sickly and my parents didn't let me work in the field, but when I got married, well, I had to. And my husband got burned and went to hospital, and commodities hadn't come yet, so I had to learn how to pick cotton, and the first day I picked was 10 pounds. And the lady that trying to show me how said, I'm going to pick on one side, so you pick like you don't want me to pick on your side. And I tried, but I couldn't. Next day, when I doubled it, as far as I went was 60. I couldn't pick no more than that. Then I had kids, so the oldest one, Johnny, used to get on my sack and I had to drag him. So I couldn't go much. As far as I went was 60.
Did your husband have an allotment?
No, we both were born late.
Mm-hmm. Where was your farm?
He was a hard hand, you might say. Sometimes we make crop on half with somebody, and sometimes we rent a place, and then whatever we make, we have to share it to the landlord.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't make much, enough to live on.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Some years made good cotton crop. Well, we reach 100.
where was the gin located? The one close
Red
to you?
Oak.
Red Oak. Who ran the gin?
I forgot the man's name. He died. I just can't remember.
After you married, what kind of house did you live in?
We lived in a camp house because we couldn't buy no furniture. That's when we was trying to buy one and we couldn't, and we was telling Grandma that we wanted to move to ourselves, but right away, but it seemed like it's a slow go. And she went to telling us this, and then my uncle come along and said, what y'all get in that camp house? And it had beds and stove and long table and dishes. And all we had to get is the food. And
What kind of house did you call it?
it was a long lumber house, thin.
It was a camp house, you said?
Camp.
Oh, camp house. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
The Indian church has a camp house with it, and we feed the people that comes there. And sometimes they want to stay overnight. Well, we got a bed there for them. But we quit that. We cook for them, but we don't sleep them. They have to go to a motel or invite them to our home.
Well, I think we have a good interview.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I want to thank you.
I did what I knew.
That was very good.
I guess I have to write them down so that my children would remember. I think Johnny remembers a lot. He will talk Choctaw to those that don't know how to talk English, but not before anybody. Some of them has lost theirs.
Mm-hmm. What about World War II? Did you do any work for the war effort?
I was a teenager, I guess, and going to school. And I went to school till I was about 21. Not regular, but off and on.
Your sons was in World War II, wasn't they?
Mm-hmm. But the other one, Ida Stolby, you know her? She lives at Red Oak. Her husband died in the other war. And that was Grandma Baker's grandson.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't know that.
You know, they're purple blossoms. Now, my grandmother called it purple blossom, and she called it a Tonktabalabi tree. And everybody calls it redbud, and I'm in agreement with my grandmother. It's a purple blossom.
Yeah.
You know what the redbud is? Mm-hmm. Okay, now, she called that a Tonktabalabi tree and said that is purple.
It's Tonktabalabi?
I haven't found it in any of the dictionaries, but that's what she called. Did you ever hear that?
Not that word. I was trying to think, but it won't come to me. What mine did say. Anyhow, when that blooms, spring is here.
Mm-hmm.
You can plant beans.
Mm-hmm.
And they say you get them buds and plant it with the beans, it would produce a lot.
I'll try that.
I never did try it.
I'll have Neil to try it.
What else would you do in your garden to make it produce more?
I mean, it was fertilizer. We used to move our barn, or he did, moved his barn, and that was well fertilized there, so we had good crop of garden stuff. But if it's not, well, they use that barn manure.
Did you ever use fish?
No, but my son-in-law does.
They use fish heads or fish leavings with the seeds?
He buried a lot out there and said any kind of garbage would do, my daughter said. Said that's what they use for their garden. Up here I tried and then dogs dug it out.
Oh my.
In Oklahoma City.
Oh, you did?
But I don't know where it went.
Did you ever get did you sign a release like that or anything? You did?
I don't know if it was for the church or just...
You don't remember who it was that...
I didn't know But I knew the other men, like you, come with him, you know. Let's see, that church. Let's go in church at Central Baptist. First, it was Indian Center, and we moved to 8th Street. Well, we became Central Baptist. So it was in between there somewhere.
What'd you do in Oklahoma City? What kind of work?
Nurse's aide at St. Anthony.
St. Anthony. You started there in 1953?
In 73,
74.
1974.
You came to Stigler.
My dad was living yet in, and I thought I was going to take care of him, but moving beside him. And my boy bought this place, and then the house was ready to fall over. So BIA built me this house.
Okay, thank you.